Thank you for joining us for the Black Album Mixtape. I'm here with award-winning public relations and marketing leader, Mr. Terry Allen, sales executive and community advocate with a passion for positioning small businesses for optimal success and motivating people to achieve their full potential. Founder of the annual fundraiser City Men Cook, a culinary celebration of men, women, and community, benefiting charities in the North Dallas community. Thank you for joining.
I'm excited to be here. You are an amazing friend and an amazing contribution to our legacy and our history and our global impact. So I wouldn't miss talking with you for the world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We're both from SMU and Dallas, Texas.
Yes,
Uh, can you
SMU.
tell me about, yes, can you tell me why you chose SMU?
I think it chose me, but let me say this: I had a jump start because
Hmm.
I was in the Upper Bound program, and
Yes.
that's the program that helped you start when you're a freshman in high school. And there were two Upper Bound programs. One was in North Texas at Denton, and the other one was SMU. And it was easier for me to get to SMU on Saturdays. So I kind of grew up in SMU, and every year the Upper Bound program would keep us for the whole summer,
Hmm.
6 weeks, 8 weeks in the summer, and we were on the SMU campus. So, and I tell you, I applied to 10 other colleges or no colleges in the state of Texas. And SMU was an automatic acceptance because you were in the Upper Bound program. And at the end of the Upper Bound program,
Mm.
you get to take two classes. And I mean, I had a 4.0, so it was easy. But my goal was to go to NYU, or I was going to go there. I was going to go to Pepperdine, or back to my patriarchal family roots in the Bay Area, where my father taught at UC Davis, and I wanted to be around Angela Davis. So that was my choice. And then SMU just put, um, I I received so much scholarships for my academic attainment, my test scores, and it
Mm.
just seemed my mother was happy. So that's I chose
Yes, and
SMU,
you got to stay close
right?
in Dallas, Texas. Uh, how was your time at SMU?
Oh, you haven't had a chance to see the oral histories, but maybe you get a chance to do
Yes,
those.
I have.
Oh
I
yeah,
have.
yeah. I think I sent you my oral background in history. And forgive me for wearing the earpiece, but there's um, a media alert coming out on an incident of racism in the community, and I've got to make sure it comes through. Um, my time at SMU was an interesting time. The comfort zone of being around the campus and having some advocates there, including Jane Albritton and Dean Leach and Professor Edwards and Professor, oh gosh, she's going to forgive me if I can't remember, Ruby Jones, Professor Jones. They were already there, and I'd known them for since I was a freshman in high school. So I
Mm.
was a buffer, but I was not prepared for the amount of racism and the amount of bias that existed during my year there. And being a person coming from awesomely rich cultural background, it was a challenge to be normal there without a fight. And
Mm.
so it was there. So like and I said in the oral history, my family was normal according to my normal, not according to SMU's normal. And so I thought, SMU was enlightening to see that there were other normals that didn't even include people that looked like me.
Mm. Do you think that there's been great change in SMU since your time uh, being a student to now?
I think that change has happened because we're in a, what do we call it, a woke season.
Mm.
And I think there's been great improvement. Now, let me say this, that while I was at SMU, I was head of I led the Black Student Union
Yeah.
um, organization. I was a student senator. I was one of the first people to run and manage the program council, which is the overall body for entertainment and student activities for the campus. And we had a multi-million dollar budget. So I didn't saying it as bad doesn't mean I wasn't engaged. I had a long resume of engagement, SMU Democrats, SMU Republicans, vote campus-wide. Um, the B school, the business school launched the journalism school programs, and I wrote for the campus newspaper. So I wasn't not involved. So I don't want people to think that I walked into a racist campus and didn't contribute. And I've contributed a lot now. I wouldn't contribute now if I didn't believe in what President Turner is doing, and if I didn't believe in the work that's coming out of the Meadows School of the Arts, the Meadows School of the Arts Division of Journalism. I want to get the title right. I wouldn't be doing all the things I do and continually contributing. So there is no way that I don't believe in the process, but the process of it being difficult for Black people of color, that's a global issue. So why I can't pretend that it didn't exist at SMU, and it wasn't pretty bad in the 70s and 80s when I went there, because it was horrible. But I was raised by a praying grandmother who also had set the foundation for my entire survival throughout my whole process. So there was no way that I would not have a good time. I wouldn't see the challenges and struggles at SMU to be part of my journey. It's where I got to go. It's my big mother said that she would say that hold me toward Philippians and 14. It says, do not be worried. Do not be worried. Do not have any anxiety toward what's going to happen to you. Celebrate the good and the bad and keep your journey moving forward. And so it was a challenge. We had town halls and meeting discussions. We stormed the president's office and demanded stuff during the time. So we kept it going. We got our own programming at one point. We got money allocated from the student activity fee so that we could have programming. I remember I was very proud when I first bought Dick Gregory, and we helped with the acquisition of Minnie Riperton and Chaka Khan, and we brought in speakers from all over the diaspora, because we fought for that allocation of those funds and put money in our pocket, in our budget to do that. Plus, under the division, I had a mother there, my mother, Mary McFall, and Mary was an advocate for all of us, and we brought in Kwame Turi, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, under her leadership as Director of Intercultural Affairs. We got our own space. We got our own recreational space there called the Office of Intercultural Affairs, and we had our own house, the Intercultural Resource Center. The bottom floor was where all the Blacks, or the Black organization there, BLAACS, met. The top was where the Hispanic organization met on the second floor. We are, of course, SMU was segregated. I mean, I've shared this story with you many times, Regina, back in the day, but I had 8 white roommates in 2 days. Every time they come in and found out I was Black, they would move out. And so I was lucky enough to have a single room without paying extra for it. So that was a great thing to do. And so the experience hasn't been easy, but it's a journey that I wouldn't repeat it. I wish I knew more now. The stuff I know now, I wish I knew more. But we left our legacy there, and that's why I'm fighting now to have some permanent memorialized space at SMU to say we were there. If you pull up to the campus now, they're gonna say, "Were there any Blacks here?" Well, you can't tell. There's nothing to tell us that we were there, unless we have oral histories. But there's nothing permanent, and we need to have something permanent.
And what do you envision then?
I think that if you looked at some of the memorializations across the country, and I work a lot with the Innocence Project. I've worked with the Brian Stevenson's initiative in the movie Just Mercy, and I love the fact that they have the museum where he shows the stones show the people who were lynched. DC has memorials all over the mall, the mall, and the Vietnamese memorial is there. The Vietnam Memorial, the War Memorial. I think that we need to etch our names in something, but at the same time, we need to there needs to have a revenue generated base to it, where we come back and say we want to empower students who come here and went through what you and I went through to be great, and that we will support them not just financially, but institutionally, where we have some way to manage and mitigate that fairness is still there, equity is still concerned, and it's not based on a position newly created position. Across the country, we got all these great positions being printed. I am now the VP of equity. And they're like, okay, what's that? I am now the uh, director of inclusion and cultural engagement. What we need, racism is not a people problem; it's an institutionalized problem. So we need to do. I want us to come back and have a standing memorial that shows us there, whether it's a sidewalk with bricks or a black wall with our names on it. And I think that would be appropriate for the Black Album mixtape to be embedded in there, that we exist. And it's the recognition of those that were not able to recognize because we didn't have a favorable system. There are a lot of honors that didn't go to people of color back in the day that I was at SMU because they just were not white people, period. We have to address the shame of that, embrace it and learn from it and not hide it. And then and it's hard sometimes with the current student population at SMU that of color because because of us, they don't have those experiences. They have a lot of more inclusive stuff. And SMUs are a great deal more inclusive, but we do need to have some institutionalized pillars of recognition that we existed. And that means that there needs to be a memorial space, whether it would be a room that we dedicate that's dedicated to the things that we contribute to the world as a whole. People of color in historically have been the mathematicians of the world, of the globe, of the diaspora. So we could dedicate a room to math and science and STEM and create scholarship behind it. And we could, and then our names would be etched there from the first person that walked in there of color that walked into SMU in the 50s to the last person there today. So we get to see our presence. Not only is that a great diversity tool, but it's a how you say it. That's what equity is. It's an equity doesn't mean equal. Just because you vote, I need to vote. Just because you had a parade, I need a parade. Equity means creating a balance within the infrastructure that I don't have to argue about my presence at the school that I love.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
makes perfect sense. Yes. We're going through similar times in this moment. It feels familiar, the eruptions that we're seeing throughout this country, the schism, the fractured psyches of people from all sides. 2020 was a monumental year. Uh, COVID-19 through George Floyd, through the presidential race. It's interesting that in this moment, we are revisiting our past in terms of race, with that being front and center. People are talking about it on all platforms, on all levels. Uh, at the same time, there is in media this explosion of various voices, uh, from actors to writers to producers who are creating work centered around our images at the same time that there is uh, a uh, emphasis of racism, intolerance in this country. Those two things warring at the same time. What's your thought? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you thought you asked the wrong person.
No, I'm asking the right person, aren't
as,
I?
as you know, it's my life work to let people know I don't have to lose my blackness to be normal. Okay. And right now, we're in this racial reckoning brought on by a pandemic and brought on by people were at home, and enough people were at home to see the death of George Floyd. Okay. And in that, we got a racial reckoning and a pandemic at the same time. And in short, I'm excited to see the chance to remove, reform, defund, dismantle. Those shouts signify our collective response to a moment sparked by the 9 minutes and 2 seconds in the death of George Floyd. But we still have to make this moment a movement, so we will not have to revisit it again. We can applaud all the corporations and institutions of education that have symbolically denounced racism, as well as stepped up to pledge huge dollar amounts to charity and supposed to be aimed at racial equity and creating these linear job titles. But we have to save ourselves to make this more of a movement. We have to control that narrative, and the we need to control that narrative simply for two reasons. I don't need charitable donations. I don't need charity because you now realize that racism is an institutional problem and it's diasporic. I need you to bring equity to the table, donating money to nonprofits and establishing unattainable goals by creating diversity and inclusion positions in your institution will not make up for a missing 40 acres and a mule that was given to us. And it will not make up for destroying our Wall Streets that were being built at the time. You know, home ownership is that 40 acres that we don't have control over. Business ownership was a mule. So we have to build wealth. We have to change institutional pillars to include us. So having a diversity statement or a so-called diversity and inclusion staff person is almost an insult because I don't think you need to have someone to remind you that you've done something wrong, but they don't have the power to change it. You know, those jobs need to have a linear power where I'll come in and say, we're going to take all of these history books and remove them and go put the history back in there. For instance, you know, when I was growing up, we were told George Washington never told a lie. It's hard to wake up and realize that was a lie itself. You know, we need to recorrect that history. So business ownership is important. And just at our school, there are so many suppliers that come in there. How does that supply chain look? If you're ordering cups, does it come from a woman owned business? Does it come from a black owned business? Does it come from an Asian owned business? Or is it from someone else? We have so many biases that prevent us from empowering people. So, you know, we have that at SMU. You know, I love the affinity bias. Oh, he's a SMU pony. I'm a pony. I'm just gonna go with him without investigating who has the most equitable opportunity for us. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So, so we need to our institutions of education, their businesses, they create revenue. We need to create and mandate that our corporations create revenue infused line items that are last for multiple years, not just recently, and
Mm.
create opportunities for people of all diverse backgrounds to come forth. And the largest disparity among um, racism is Black folk. We built this country on forced labor and free. If we were to ask the math department at SMU to turn that into a algorithm, we'll find out that that 40 acres of a mule is worth about $294,000 right now. You know, free labor. So you know, you can create all the diversity and inclusion positions you want, but if you're not going to have an infrastructural change, you're wasting my time.
People are prepping themselves for the return of normal now that we have people being vaccinated, people's cities are opening back up. uh, what is normal moving forward? Certainly, even within your industry uh, with media, as well as FedEx, all industries, all people have been touched and have had to adapt during this period. What does normal look like moving forward?
Well, I don't think we're ready to define what normal is. I can tell you what has occurred because we lost the old normal. Productivity has gone through the roof. People are producing more now when they're isolated at home than they were when they were in groups at work. Right? We are now pushing more. We're pushing more warehousing space than we are workspace space. You know, we don't need people to come into work. We need to know where we're going to warehouse all the stuff that people are demanding that they be shipped to their homes. And that we want to drive by and pick up something, come back. So productivity is through the roof. I think it's hard when you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's going to be hard to have the proper level of inclusion if I'm not sitting right next to you, you can see me, hear me. My whole thing on diversity, equity, and inclusion is this. Diversity is I see you. Inclusion means I hear you. But equity means I empower you to be just as equal as me and to have the same rights and powers that I have. That's the weakest link in our in this whole pandemic and this new normal is equity. And sometimes you can't create that equity if you don't have face-to-face interactions and build relationships in the professional world and in the media that happen because you are engaging each other from a human perspective. You know, we can't zoom our way to change. So that's one of the disparities about the new normal. And I don't think we know what the new normal is going. We are in a new normal, hoping that the old normal comes back at least 90%, so we can be in
Hmm,
a future normal. And
hmm,
and I don't think it's going to come back that quick. Productivity is great, but also we've allowed our leadership to lead us into a world of volatility. We've allowed disinformation in this great normal we're in to rule. We have allowed people have how do we say this? I didn't see if I can say it properly. Individuals don't have the promise of God in their journey of disinformation and ill will. So we can't let crazy rule us because sometimes in this current status, crazy has become a normal.
hmm,
You know, we see that people are being vaccinated and that the rate of infection is going down. But there are some people who say the virus isn't real. The vaccines are going to kill you. And that's not related to that's not minimized to color. That's minimized to culture. There are people who look like me say the same thing.
hmm,
You know, and because of all of the wrongs in our society that has affected people of color, you know, the Tuskegee experiment, the inappropriate sterilization of black women, black girls. You know, slavery didn't change; it evolved. It went from plantations to post Reconstruction to lynching to chain gang to Jim Crow to economic disparity. It didn't change; it became great. And then you've got since George Floyd, I can't tell you the multiple number of black men who've been killed by police officers still. So we've got to understand that and ask people, like I say, you can't let crazy rule you. I work for my big mama's philosophy. She's the one that runs me. Big mama definitely wanted everyone in her family to break the chain and let go of bad, strongly held beliefs and embrace the greater good. She knew that if we let go of belief systems that were no good, we could say goodbye to the bad. So right now, as we turn the tide on COVID and as we come to a normal where we're going to interact, we have got to, I don't know, we've got to let crazy not be in power. We got to put crazy at the back door. You know, the vaccines don't work. Crazy, bye. You know, there is no real virus. Crazy, bye. You know, right? I love the ones that I hear that are people say racist statements and they don't know. Like I got some black friends that just don't even know how racist that is. And then I love the other most humane statement that people say that is inherently racist. I don't see color. I said, I said, when you pick that salad over in the bar, that you throw it in a blender and drink it, oh no, that'd be awful. I love the tomatoes, the croutons, all the things I'm putting on that salad. I said, then how can you not see color? If you can see the details that make a salad perfect and the differences in all the ingredients, how can you not see color? That's a racist statement in itself. You know, I hope that answered your question.
uh, as we are, as we're seeing things shift uh, each and every day, uh, what is it that we need to do to make this moment a movement?
We need to maintain the momentum. There is a clash between the young and the old. You know, I belong to the baby boomer club. I'll let you speak for yourself, Regina. And the people out there are considered millennials, Generation X and Y. And there is no cohesion there. And there's so much we can learn from each other. While the younger people while we failed, and they're not us, but our forebears were just before us decided they weren't going to talk about how we got to be so racist and in such a racist society. They didn't talk about Jim Crow. They didn't talk about lynching. They didn't talk about colored only spaces. I have on my coffee table here a plaque that I took out of a restaurant in Alabama that says for colored only. And it's on my coffee table as a decorative piece. But it creates so much conversation among younger Black people that come through my home. And then we get to talk, and then we realize that they're sharing. We didn't tell these young people what we went through. And therefore they were able to say, this is crazy. You're not going to treat us like this.
Mm.
And I saw a sign by one protester, we're not our ancestors, we will hurt you. And so they've done a fantastic job of mobilizing and keeping this at the forefront and doing civil protest and making the protest rise above the looters, rise above the anarchists. They've done a fantastic job of that. However, they didn't stare around and talk to the older people who created economic change. You know, the boycott in Birmingham, Black people stayed off a bus for a little over a year and went back and forth to work. And they were organized. And when people discovered where they were meeting, they immediately threw all their paperwork and all their routes and riders and drivers into their purses and just jumped on the sidewalk and started walking, because they would never, as soon as they found out where they were, they could get all that stuff gathered in their purses and their shirts and pockets and start walking, so they never understand where the plans were. And many other places where Blacks were meeting during the Birmingham boycott were discovered, and mainstream America ran in there to get them. But they were able to dismantle and disappear within 12 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes. And they were able to stay off that bus system for a little over a year and cripple the budget system until they could sit at the front. That's economic reparations right there. But the young people don't even know that story. They get, oh, really? That'll happen? So our biggest challenge for us to make this moment of movement is that we've got to talk. This division between young people, I'm looking at all the, speaking of those diversity and equity positions I tell you about, every time I run into someone who just got it, I don't think any of them are over 40. And so I want to say, how are you going to deal with racial inequities, health disparities among people of color, and you don't even have that history? There are people, I ask people, I says, what do you remember about music? And they say, I remember the CD. So if you can't remember albums, LPs, and 45s, how are you going to help bridge the gap? How are we going to make anything permanent and you don't have that historical impact in your face living with you? So people of color have got to embrace the old and the new. And we've got to do it as partners, not the old people being condescending, trying to tell their story to the young people, and not the young people turn around and say, you don't know nothing. We're doing it this way. I got a cell phone. And, you know, that whole barrier keeps us busy so that institutionalized racism stays institutionalized. You know, people don't understand that right here in the city of Dallas where I live, the Interstate 30 disrupted a very thriving Black Wall Street community called Jubilee Park. But the freeway disrupted it, disrupted business and everything. Okay. And people said, and the young people talk, well, we had integration. You didn't have integration, you had forced assimilation. Because integration requires that you come to my side of town too, and you didn't come. You know, when I was at LG Pinkston, I fired LG Pinkston. When busing came in, we went to WT White. WT White did not come to us. You know, so there was no integration. That was a forced assimilation. And if you didn't cater to the powers of values that were mainstream, then you had a difficult time. So we have a lot of people who lost their cultural core. And I don't want to talk too long, but I can tell you, we've lost our memory. And how do we make it a moment, this movement a moment? We need to restore our memory. Dr. Anthony Browder speaks about that all right. He calls himself a memory recovery specialist. But we've lost our memory. We've lost our name. Even people like yourself and others who embrace our cultural richness. Well, when you bring that message to some of us ain't ready to hear it.
Mm.
Okay, because we have so acculturated to the power culture that we don't want to hear this. We don't want to embrace our names. I asked a group of young people, give me some nationalities that you know are inherently attached to us. Okay, Uh, uh, um, what they gave me was, oh, Italian, French, Spanish, Brazilian. I said, well, you forgot about Asante, Yoruba, Benin, Ibu, Zulu. They go, what you talking about? I didn't continue the conversation because I know they didn't know. But we don't have appreciation for what we have. The stories we tell ourselves about Africans are untrue, and the stories we know about Europeans in our culture are untrue. So we have to recover our memory. Just recently, when I was young and just during your time, I couldn't find anything manufactured by anybody that looked like me, that served me. I remember black women trying to get the darkest makeup so they could at least put makeup on. And all of a sudden, mainstream America realized that we are bankers, we buy makeup and we do entertainment, and they tend to appropriate our gifts. So we have to recover our memory in order to do that. And we have to talk to each other. The young and old cannot be divided. And then we have to go back and appreciate what our true culture is. I told someone, a young man who was 24 years old today, that the pyramids in Africa, northern Egypt and southern Africa, mid Africa, were built by people that look just like him. As you can see, it's behind my wall there. And they did it without electricity. They did it from their mindset and their leveraging of weights. And to this day, the Japanese have tried to do it and fail. The Europeans have tried to use machinery and fail. And we can't figure out how to build those pyramids anymore. And they are perfect mathematical equations. I said, so how do you gain that memory back? He was shocked that that's there. I,
Yes,
so I started mentioning some names to him. I said, who are your heroes? And they started naming some people. Then, you get the customary Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Early 20 years ago, I wouldn't even get Malcolm X, just Martin. But they didn't know about Garvey, Julius Nyerere. None of these history people out there. They didn't even know that the Zulu tribe were held off on the infiltration of South Africa for decades. They still think that Columbus discovered America instead of the fact that he was just lost.
yes, the generations have to talk to each other.
Yes, we
We
have.
have to learn from each other.
Yeah, we have to get.
One, how we got here to this moment, what were the strategies, how we implement those strategies and adapt them to the challenges that we face right now.
Yeah.
Speaking of those challenges, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in this last 12 months?
Oh, the biggest challenge. I am a certified extrovert. So I've been home for a year by myself. Yeah. And 9 months of that year, there was no other interaction. In the last 3 months, there has been.
Mm.
So trying to create mental self-care, being isolated and having to govern my elders' health care and food care, who were not being there, and pulling up to their house and not being able to go in, but leaving food outside, convincing elders in my family, my mom, my aunt, that you can't just drive anywhere anymore, don't do that, and convincing my family members that you have got to sanitize when you go to a gas station. You've got to use your gloves. It's been frustrating for I'm a recovering extrovert. And so the
Mm.
mental self, the detachment from engagement. I'm also a person of African descent. People engagement is part of our pillars. We are a people engagement. We are a people engagement culture. Our arts, our griots, our stories, the way we built pyramids, the way we created medical systems that people use today. The architecture in Washington, D.C. was based on African architecture from the middle parts of Africa along the Congo and Senegal. And those people built things around the 13th arc, but they had to engage each other. No one architect built that thing.
Mm.
So I come from a culture that engages through people engagement. And so these past 12 months have been a mental challenge. And reaching out to people, you have to determine which one is a friendship and which one's a relationship. Because a lot of people have a relationship with you because of work or projects, but they don't have a friendship with you. And they'll take your disparity and your weakness and they'll capitalize on it and use that, because a lot of folks, as you know, I can't fix what's wrong with me, but I'll make some things I found good about you terrible so that you can wallow down in this with me. And so we have to deal with those type of mindsets. So it's been difficult doing that. And I've seen grandparents finally see their grandchildren after the vaccines. And I see the emotional toll it takes on them and the joy they have now. So, but what's good about my culture and about people is that hope is in our DNA. So we knew it was going to get better anyway. We just had to wait. We had to buy that time. And so it's been difficult for me for 12 years not being able to engage. I'm in PR, so communications is an engagement process. It's an engaged people process. There's been a lot of pivot to the virtual space and it's been very successful. But Cityman Cook that I do here, that's 2,500 people showing up to see black men and white men and men of all colors cook and serve food. And we celebrate men and honor women. But we put young people like myself who grew up without a father to see men of a positive light and engage with them and then teach them pillars of success. And you cannot make that virtual as successful as you made it live. So these 12 months have been a lesson in renewal and a lesson in perseverance.
Thank you so much. Good talking with you.
I think it's great. I think it's great that I am talking with you. I think it's great that we are. Thank you for the Black Album mixtape. It allows us to see something that should be inherently part of our education process. We don't control our educational institutions. We don't control our political parties. We don't control our economic growth. Until we do and have these conversations that you're creating with your Black Album, there won't be a movement. It'll just be a moment. And the moment's not fading. I don't care what nobody says. It's going to be around for a minute. And so we have to do those institutionalized things. This recording, this Black Album, this is something that I can give to a 16-year-old I haven't met yet who will never meet me but see me. And they'll come back and say, I think I could do that. I believe. I've got a young man who's got a yoga business, and because he heard something else I said,
Mhm.
he has emailed me and said, I need a business plan. I said, I got it for you. I sent it to him. And he sent back a note that says, wow, I didn't mean for you to write the whole plan. I said, well, why reinvent the wheel? You keep making the yoga and I'll keep putting the infrastructure together. He's 24 and I'm over 24. So that's a connection that makes a moment, a movement, and it becomes great. There, as far as work is concerned,
Yeah.
somebody went through training and they saw my video where I says, you got to create a wow moment with your customer. I made a splash with my customer, so therefore I'm sitting on the southern coast of France making a splash celebrating what I've done at this company. And I got an email from him yesterday. He says, I saw your email. I've never been more motivated to be able to come to this company and do a great job. I hope I can reach out to you. And I emailed him back and said, you just did.
Mhm.
And now we're going to be email BFFs, and I hope you do well in Canada for our company. It's a great place to be. It's a great company to work for. And we have to make sure that all of those blocks and barriers to change are eliminated in our workforce and in our community. So thank you, Regina, for the Black Album mixtape. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for all that you are doing.
You are my blessing. So I appreciate it.
You are my blessing.